Of the most influential people in all of history, there are few to none more powerful and key to today's society than Julius Caesar. Caesar's actual birthday is disputed between July 12th or July 13th, 100 BC. But he was born into a poor family in an unstable Rome. By the time he was 26, the main man had already married his way into Rome's nobility, escaped from pirates that kidnapped and ransomed him off, and wound up being hanged once Caesar was rescued, as well as raising an entire army to combat this one crazy king named Pontus. When he returned to Rome from kicking so much of that anti-Romanism outside of Rome where it belongs, he began working under the general Pompey. Now Pompey was superior when it came to commanding all the legions, and Caesar got his first taste of that Roman political life. It was also at this time that Caesar started hanging around with this one general named Crassus, who had a considerable amount of money. Both Crassus and Pompey were considered the most powerful men in Rome at the time. One based his crazy skills at slaughtering enemies of Rome, while also expanding the borders through campaigns, and the other for some of his military action in his earlier years, but mainly through the immeasurable wealth, more than any other person in Rome at the time. Not surprisingly, these two boys hated each other before Caesar stepped in to negotiate things between them. The three formed a partnership called the Triumvirate, and both of them proved to be very valuable assets to Caesar's career. Caesar's first move of giving public land to Pompey's soldiers to compensate them for their services attracted many a hater to his policy, but soon he was governing Gaul, modern-day France, with his two main boys back in the capital running things. It's at this point where Caesar began his campaigns that made him the world-famous general he is today, known all over as living that came, saw, conquered life. Once he became governor, over the course of 8 years, Julius Caesar conquered the rest of Gaul, giving him a reason to rapidly expand his powerful army and leading to him showing his ruthlessness in battle. At one point, he waited until his enemies' water ran out, then cut the hands off those who survived. Now, it's important to mention how Caesar wasn't exactly trusting his fellow partners back in the Triumvirate who were running the Senate. So he sent spies to monitor the situation back in the homeland, and he was right in doing it. Crassus began hating Pompey again, and Pompey was simply getting more and more jealous over how much power Caesar had built himself. Eventually, the three boys patched everything up, but Crassus died shortly after in Syria, and without him to keep Pompey sane, Pompey began his angry reign of hatred towards Caesar. And what does one do when he's jealous of another man's army and power? Boy, he builds his own army and flies straight at the other one, which is exactly what Pompey did in 49 BC. However, no single army could go up against those mad legions of Caesar, so Pompey and his army were chased all the way to Egypt, where he was eventually shanked. Now Caesar returned a sort of hero in Rome once he accomplished all he is known for. Although a lot of people didn't exactly trust Caesar, which they wouldn't, seeing him as an elected dictator for life, a title that really wasn't seen too often back then. It's at this point where historians debate which of Caesar's accomplishments, in battle or in office, were most important. On the one hand, some argue that Caesar would have never been able to hook up Rome with all those accomplishments if he had never extended the borders as far as he did, collecting wealth from foreign countries and raising an army so large that even the greatest general in Roman history couldn't defeat it. Without all this, Caesar might have just been another ambitious fool wandering around Rome in search of power. But no, it's because he pushed the borders to make it one of the biggest and most powerful empires the world has seen to date that he was able to make all the change happen back in the capital. But even this argument reinforces the other side, which is that Caesar was known for being a general. But it all led up to those years in office as the head of state for life, son. That was Caesar at his prime, making coins with his pretty face on them, reducing debt, rebuilding 2 major cities, and rewriting the Roman calendar. But the majority of his deeds that were most notable came from the Senate, in which he reorganized in a way that was more fair to the public by opening their concerns for direct questioning and resizing it entirely to do his good work for the people of Rome. Now, in both cases, it's important to mention that Caesar had a huge crush on the people of Rome, but really did hate everyone outside it. It's why he allowed his political enemies to remain in the Senate by his side once he took over, but also received many complaint letters from tribes he had taken over during his conquests. None of these complaints were positive, especially when it came to their treatment. Caesar did grant a lot of people citizenship, but what's the point of that if they are all confined to disgusting reservations all the time? Many people seem to view Caesar as a god, for they never talk directly about him in any of his letters. There are a few books he wrote describing his conquests, but he was incredibly secretive about his political career. In fact, he kept it real gangster, never telling anybody about his next move, 'cause when the boss was in political office, nobody seemed to question his rule. That is, of course, until he was shanked up in the Senate on the Ides of March, forever ending the great ruler that was Julius Caesar. But the calendar he wrote is still the loosely translated version we use today. His military bossery is still studied and applied, his politics are still debated, and it's for this reason, and the fact that the Roman Empire wound up collapsing, that we agree that his time as dictator for life was when his legacy was being built the most, and his leadership of the Roman people was at its strongest. Yet it is undeniable that the conquests in which he spread the Roman culture and language are the reason many European countries have Latin-based languages, including English, Spanish, and French. 3 very important languages that we all know today.